In this video, we'll discuss routing policies and default routing policies on Juniper devices. When a router advertises a route through a routing policy, and that advertisement is received by your router looks to its routing policy to determine if it should accept that route information and add it to the routing table, or if it should reject the information. When a router receives route information and adds it to the routing table, that is known as importing a route. On the other hand, if your router is sending out a route advertisement message, that is known as exporting a route. The routing policy determines if the route is to be accepted. The routing policy is a group of rules you can configure that can evaluate the advertisement message and then perform an action such as accept or reject the route. If you do not configure a policy, a routing policy, or a rule that filters the outgoing or incoming route advertisement messages, the Juniper device uses a default policy. The default policy of either accept or reject depends on the protocol and the direction of the message, whether it's being exported or imported. For example, OSPF and RIP advertisement import messages are accepted by default, but exporting those route information is rejected by default. As an administrator, you're responsible for configuring routing policies that implement the rules of which types of routing advertisement messages are to be accepted or rejected. As an administrator, you create routing policies that are rules that specify whether you want to accept or reject different route advertisement messages that come into the router or exported out of your router. Now, what happens if I create a routing policy where there are no rules that actually match a specific message that comes into the router? What happens? A default policy is applied. So there are default routing policies, and those are applied to all incoming and outgoing route advertisement messages where you have not configured an explicit policy to handle that type of message. When you create those routing policies or even the default policies that exist, there's a number of different actions that you can implement. So for instance, when the route advertisement message comes into your router, the router will evaluate the characteristics of that route advertisement message and match it against your rules. And then each of those rules will specify a specific action or one or more actions that need to be performed. So a good example of actions that you can specify, are things like you want to accept the route or you want to reject the route. When it comes to default policies, the default policies will have either an accept or a reject. Some items of consideration in regards to default policies. The first is with OSPF. With OSPF, you can't alter or change the import policies. So the policies that you're creating or altering as default policies apply to exported routes only. The default action with export policies is to reject everything when it comes to OSPF. Another consideration is in regards to automatic export. This is for layer 3 VPNs. The automatic export feature will automatically export routes between local VPN and forwarding routing instances. In this video, we discuss default routing policies.